everybody. Gonna give it about 10 minutes for everybody to get in here, or for anybody to get in here. uh, for anybody to get in here. Okay, so sorry, just getting everything ready. Okay. Okay. Almost ready. How long have we been going here? Hope you all are having a good night. Let's not do that. Let's do this. Let's put this up there. There we go. Start doing that with the other ones. You know how that goes. So give it another 5 minutes. That's what we've been doing. Wait until about the 10-minute mark. So, anybody have anything exciting that they would like to talk about? Oh, so this is the 5th chapter, read along of my new book, Chronicles of Iron, The Tie That Binds. This is already released, although I need to go back through and re-edit it. I noticed some issues when we were going through the first read. I still have 2 chapters to go. And before you start saying how unprofessional that is, I never claimed to be a professional. So, and 2, I've already read it like 7, 8 times and proofread it, edited, just missed some things. Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. We're at 7-minute mark. Excuse me. Okay, everybody. Okay. All right, as before, if you have a question, just go ahead and throw it in the chat. If I see it, I will get to it. But just letting you know, I have it opened a little bit more this time, so I might see it. Okay. Okay. Chapter 5, Mystery Undone. The wind was steady the first day out. It pulled at their coats and carried dust into their mouths every time they tried to talk, which wasn't often. The group kept tight, heads down, eyes forward, just horses, hoofbeats, and wide stretches of land. Ian rode between Johnny and Henry. Spider trailed behind with Rick and Brad, letting the space settle where attention used to be. Jason, as usual, was quiet near the back, taking in everything without speaking. That night they camped in a narrow draw beside a patch of stubborn grass. Henry caught 2 hares. Brad made a fire. No one asked how they were feeling. Nobody asked if Ian was ready. They passed a pot of meat and beans around and chewed in silence. Later, after most had gone to sleep, Henry sat across from Ian, who was poking the embers with a stick. You sleep better now? Henry said. He wasn't looking for praise, just saying what he noticed. Ian kept his eyes on the fire some nights. Henry nodded once. It ain't about staying sober. It's about waking up wanting to. Stick cracked in Ian's hand. He tossed it aside. I want to. Second day brought more wind and less talk. They started seeing people coming the other way. Men in busted hats, women with torn skirts and wild eyes. A wagon clattered with one wheel tilted badly. The driver had a busted lip. He kept pressing a cloth to his cheek, like he'd already had a rough morning. One man stumbled close to their path. His lip was bleeding, pointed back towards the distance, and said, "Ain't no peace in that town. Just bullets and boot heels." Then he staggered off without waiting for a response. Johnny shifted in the saddle. Town's got a reputation, always has. "Beatrice isn't that big," Ian exclaimed. Henry grunted behind them. "We're not walking in to settle anything, just to see." Ian kept his mouth shut. He was always thinking ahead. Doors, saloon windows, faces that stared too long, the smell of whiskey in the floorboards. He wasn't pretending it would be easy. As the city outline started forming in the distance, just a few buildings at first, smoke trailing up behind him, Henry leaned closer to his saddle and said, "Keep your head straight in there." Ian glanced at him. "I mean it," Henry said. "You've been crawling out of a pit. Don't jump back into a new one just to see if you can climb out again." Ian nodded slowly. "I hear you." They didn't stop riding. Not after the warnings, not after the doubt. The town was waiting, and Ian wasn't sure what it would take from him. He only knew he'd find out soon. They reached the town just before sunset. Beatrice didn't look much for the hilltop, but it was just many roofs, chimneys, and canopies spread along a crooked road. The air was thick and dirty, probably from a dozen chimneys burning through the morning. You could smell ash in your nose before you even saw the smoke. Even before they reached the edge of town, noise carried. A dog barked somewhere behind a fence. Two men argued down the street, their words dragging like they'd been drinking since morning. Then a shot went off far enough not to duck, but close enough that no one could pretend this was a quiet place. Nobody said anything right away. Rick's horse shifted under him. He rubbed the animal's neck and scanned the town's edge. "Busy for a dying town," he said. Brad pulled his hat lower and leaned forward in the saddle. "Let's keep to the edges. I'll find a stable or something less loud." Johnny watched the street for a few more seconds. "Some towns live fast," he said. "This one looks like it's dying that way." Ian stepped off the horse and hit the ground. The road smelled like shit and smoke. He stayed there for a second, looking around like he was trying to remember what town this even was. There was a saloon with a broken shutter, a general store with a door halfway open. A man in a ripped coat wandered into the alley, dragged one foot behind him like he forgot it was there. He didn't look drunk, just empty. Two kids ran past him barefoot, one holding a slingshot, the other a chicken. Smelled like old beer, horse sweat in a town that didn't care who walked in. Excuse me. Henry came up behind him and dropped down from his horse. He didn't crowd Ian. He just stood next to him, wiping his hands on his pants. "We heading to the saloon?" he asked. Ian's eyes were still scanning the street. "Guess we'll find out." Spider stayed on his horse. He didn't say anything. He just watched with his arms crossed. Nothing in his face gave away what he thought, but he clearly didn't like what he saw. Rick and Brad left without a word, each heading in the opposite directions to explore the quieter buildings. Johnny pulled his horse toward the water near the edge of town. "Let's not act like we're moving in. Let's just find somewhere to sit and breathe." Jason remained at the rear, eyes following everything but saying nothing. Ian adjusted his coat, walked forward. His boots made thick sounds in the mud, steady, one step at a time. Nobody welcomed him. No one even looked twice. He wasn't sure if that was better or worse. The saloon stood in the middle of town. The sign out front was crooked, and the paint looked faded, but the windows were clean, and the front steps were swept. That says something. The kind of tired order that clung on by routine. Johnny pushed the door open and held it without speaking. Ian stepped through first. Looking around, Ian went to the far corner looking for a wench to talk to. Johnny followed in a few moments later, noticing one card table and a faro table at the far end, near the middle of the saloon. The card table had 3 players and 2 open seats. He looked to see if he recognized any players, but failed to do so. Johnny sat at one of the seats at the card table and tossed $20 on the table. The other men looked at him and dealt him in on the next hand. Henry fell in line about 10 minutes later, walking through the saloon doors. He looked at the card table and walked towards it, noticing that Johnny managed to win a hand or two because he had about $18 left, and the other men all looked like they had between 10 and 50 on the table. Henry said, "Looky here. Can I take that other seat? You all mind?" Flashing $50 to entice the other players. A man named William, the current dealer, said, "No, not at all. Good sir, have a seat." Henry sat down in the last open chair, nodding to the other players. "Thank you." "So, what are we playing?" Henry coaxed. "Dealer's choice," William said. A few rounds went by, and Henry had $45. Johnny had 22, and there were roughly $90 left on the table. Over the next 20 to 30 minutes, the rest of the boys filtered into the saloon and branched out to better secure the inside of the saloon if anything happened. Henry was up next. 5 card the hard way, no jokers, Henry insisted, shuffling with precision, speed, and deftness, then dealing out to the rest of the table and making sure Johnny was stacked. During the shuffle, Henry laid the winning hand at the bottom, thinking, "Those are Johnny's cards." He dealt every one except Johnny from the top of the deck. He had to make it look good. He had to give them all winning hands, but not enough to win. The air was tense. This was his time to shine. He wanted to show the others his worth. He knew they were all watching. Johnny just had to do his part and not give any tells as to his hand's worth, and realize which was the bum card. He had to coax them all in nice and subtle, Henry included, but he knew that he would need to help Johnny pull this off. They go around the table looking at their cards. Jax, one of the other players, looked at his cards. He had a queen, king, 8, 8, and an ace. He threw away the queen and king, too, he says. Tomlin looks at his cards. 2, 2, 4, 4, king. 1, he says, as he throws away the king. Johnny looks at his cards and tries his best not to give anything away, as he's quite literally fighting back the feeling of throwing his hat across the bar. He had 10, jack, queen, king, 2 in his hands, all spades. 1, Johnny says as he throws the 2 on the pile. William looks at his hand as he has a 5, 5, 5, jack, ace in his hand. 2, William says as he tosses the jack and the ace on the pile. Henry looks at his cards finally, and he sees he dealt himself a 6, 7, 8, 8, and another 7. He says 1 for the dealer as he tosses the 6 on the pile and gives everyone their replacement cards. Then, dealing himself last, he looks to his left, and Jack says, "What do you bet?" Jax looks at his cards and feels confident with what he was given. An ace and the 3 as his replacements, making 2 pairs, aces and 8s. $20, Jack says with fire in his voice. Probably the best hand he's had all night. He only has $5 left, and so far, William has been the biggest winner with probably $70 in front of him. Tomlin looks at his cards and automatically starts twirling his mustache with Johnny picked up. Was one what he'd done when he had a good hand. Tomlin says 25. The enticement to which he said that he had the others look up at him in surprise. Johnny looked at his cards and just about panicked. I'm in, he said with confidence, and hunched over and looked at William. Excuse me. William looked at his cards and said, well, boys, I hate to do this to you, but it's been a long night. All in. The rest of the guys at the table gulped and started getting nervous. Each had a winning hand, so they each had their confidence, but it was wavering after that display. Henry gulped and pushed his money into the pile, shaking his head. Let's hope this ends well, he spoke. The rest followed suit. In, Jack said. In it to win it, Tomlin barked. Johnny said, yep, me too. What you got? William flipped and tossed his 4 5s on the pile of money that scattered on the table. Read 'em and weep, fellas. 4 of a kind. The rest of the men folded their hands and threw them on the table with conviction, except Johnny. I wouldn't get too excited, William, Johnny said as he tossed a royal flush 10 through ace of spades on the pile. William's eyes went blank and his jaw dropped to the ground. Cheat! Cheat! You're a cheater! William let loose with a guttural scream, reaching for his pistol at his right hip. Johnny was faster, and he had his pistol up, cocked and pointed at William's face in a split second. The other boys scanned the crowd to see if anyone was following William's lead. The crowd, for the most part, looked stunned and did not seem to back William in any sort of way. Johnny kept his eyes on the table to see if anyone was going to help William, and no one moved. Johnny started collecting the money on the table as quickly as possible, and within a minute, Johnny was on his way out the door, keeping his pistol pointed directly at William. The other boys watched, absolutely ready to pounce if the situation called for it. They let Johnny go out the door, and William left after a couple more drinks. No one followed Johnny or called for his head. Jax tried to keep William grounded, saying, you lost fair and square, you old coot. Tom was still shaking his head in disbelief after watching the hands that were played. Henry had another drink before he left, and the boys filed out within the next 10 minutes to meet back at camp. The camp just beyond the last building. The trees weren't thick enough to hide them entirely, but they gave them breathing room from the town and enough silence to think. The fire was small, just enough for warmth and a little light. Rick passed half a loaf of bread and a strip of dried meat. Nobody said much. Jason sat with his back to a tree, chewing slowly and watching the sky. Brad poked the fire and now and then, not really looking at anyone. Well, boys, that could have gone better, Ian said. Ian sat near the fire, elbows on his knees, not looking at anyone. Henry leaned against the log nearby, legs stretched out. He hadn't spoken since they'd set up. He didn't have to. Everyone felt the shift in the air. Things weren't the same anymore. Yeah, I should have stretched it out. Next time. I need to go for broke so early, Henry said. Footsteps came up behind him, steady, not trying to hide. Spider showed himself a second later. He snuffed his hands in his coat pockets and leaned against the tree nearby, just outside the firelight. He didn't sit, just stood there, eyes locked on Ian like he was still waiting to be proven right. That was fun, Spider said condescendingly. After a few long minutes, Ian spoke. His voice was steady. Hello. Y'all okay? No one answered. No one needed to. Jason looked toward him for a moment, then back to the fire. Henry gave a single slow nod, the kind that said he'd heard it, and it sat fine with him. Spider didn't move. He stood there for a second longer, arms still folded. Then he pushed off the tree and walked off, not saying a thing. The others stayed quiet, still. A shot cracked somewhere out past the stables. Then another. Everything went quiet again. Ian didn't move. His eyes stayed closed after that. Everyone understood. They got lucky. It could have went south in a split second, and what they were doing was by far much more dangerous than anything they've done in the past. The rewards were much higher, though. In the past, they made no more than $50 a week. Just tonight, they made 90, almost double what they made in a week before. They understood the risk, and they were learning to sit with their new reality. It appears Henry had a plan to reduce risk. The fire cracked. The creek murmured beside them. Beatrice buzzed somewhere behind them. Still loud, still alive. Ian sat still, not chasing sleep, just holding the quiet. Later that afternoon, they passed through a small, worn-down town called Odell. It wasn't much, just a few buildings clinging at the edge of relevance. But something caught Ian's eye as they rode through. A man sat near the town's edge, beneath a tattered awning, surrounded by a semicircle of stones and worn animal bones. He was older, wrapped in thick layers despite the heat, and spoke calmly to the few people who came near him. A sign carved into a splintered plank read, "Dreams, visions, truths. Ask the spirits." Ian pulled his horse to a stop. The others slowed behind him, shifting impatiently in their saddles. "I need a minute," Ian said. Brad was the first to grumble, but Henry gave a short nod. "Go on, then. We'll wait." Ian approached the man. "Are you a shaman?" The man looked up, eyes sharp beneath heavy brows. "Yes, I'm Pawnee, a medicine man. My people have lived in these lands for many generations, and I have walked with them for over 400 years. The Great Father has kept me close to my family here to guide them." His voice was calm, but it carried weight. "What do you need, white man?" "I've been having the same nightmare every night. I don't know what it means," Ian said, shifting from one foot to another. "I was hoping maybe you could help." The shaman nodded once. "Nightmares that return again and again, they are not just dreams. That is strong magic. The Great Father is trying to show you something, something that will change your path. Tell me, what is this dream?" "One with the white man." Ian hesitated, then began. "I'm walking through the woods near my house. There's snow on the ground. I cross a small footbridge and follow a path uphill until I reach a cabin. I go inside, shut the door behind me. Inside there are bodies hanging upside down from the rafters, one sitting slumped on a bench." He stopped for a second, eyes unfocused. Then I hear a grunt, like something huge outside, trying to get in. The door holds, but I panic. I find a back window, slip out, and I run. I make it near the footbridge again and stop and look back. He swallowed. That's when I see him. He's standing there, tall, 7 feet, maybe more, hairy, but thin, like a walking shadow with bones. Looks like a werewolf, sort of, but not really. There's something worse in him. I turned and ran. I hear him howl, and I look back again. When I get across the bridge, he just jumps and clears the river like it was nothing. I don't stop running until I reach the clearing where my house is. I go in and I head up to my room. There's a window that faces the trail. That's when the dream changes. I'm not me anymore. I'm him. I'm seeing through his eyes. I stop at the edge of the woods, and then I always wake up. He looked at the shaman. Why do I know its name? The Wendigo. What is it? The old man went quiet, letting the silence stretch. Then he leaned forward. You know its name, he said, because you know it. Ian's brow furrowed. The Wendigo is not just a beast, the shaman continued. It's a spirit, a cannibal. It feeds on people, on rage, on grief, on the parts of us that rot in silence. You see it in your dreams, not because it follows you, but because it is you. Ian blinked, stunned. What? It is inside you, the shaman said softly. The anger, the bitterness, the pain. It will eat you from the inside out if you do not face it. That is the warning. That is why the Great Father sends these dreams. He sat back, letting the wind move through the hanging strips of fabric around him. You must change, or you are doomed. Then, with finality, he waved a hand. Go now, white man. Think about what I've told you. Ian stood there for a moment, as if he'd taken a blow and was still trying to find his footing. He walked back toward the others, dazed. Brad leaned over his saddle horn. Well? Ian didn't answer. He looked like he's just walked through a storm. He had swung back onto his horse. The others watched him. No one joked. No one pushed. Something in him was different, and they all felt it. They passed 3 groups on the road that afternoon, all headed the other way. Wagons, horses, sometimes just people on foot with what they could carry. One man wore a butcher's apron, streaked with dust and blood that didn't look fresh. A woman pushed a child in a cart meant for apples. Nobody made eye contact for long. Johnny pulled up his horse as they crested a ridge. That's the 3rd wagon headed east. Looks like hell's moving west. No one answered. The 4th group they passed had a boy no older than 10, running a mule with a rifle too long for his arms. He waved once, hollow-eyed, and tried walking past unmolested. What town are y'all coming from over there? Brad asked the boy. The boy stopped for a moment and looked right at Brad, just sat silent on his mule for probably 2 minutes, then blinked and said, Hanover, then continued to ride on past. The boy had the smell of death on him. It was so thick something must have happened in less than an hour or so. The stench was something. Ian knew it all too well. He's scared. Ian declared, you know, sometimes you end up riding right back around to what almost killed you, Spider said with a wit so profound. In the moment, the others just looked at one another in confusion. I didn't know you could think, Spider, Ian chided. Spider snorted at Ian in a not so amusing way. Any of y'all know anything about Hanover? Johnny asked. Everyone shook their heads side to side. Okay then, let's ride and keep your eyes up, Henry said. The boys rode their horses more southwest as they could see Hanover in the distance, and rain clouds overhead. Storm was brewing, and everyone was on edge expecting the worst. They rode in silence as the rains were coming. They could, no, I'm sorry, one second. Sorry, had to make a correction. They rode in silence as the rains were coming, and they were still about an hour out of town. The winds were whipping up, and the horses were nervous. They rode straight for stables, hoping to put their horses up for the night and get a room, as the weather was not so kind. They also figured they could use a rest. They paid the stable master to bed the horses for the night and moved towards the saloon. Jason, go get a look around, Ian stated. Jason moved in through the saloon doors, moving his eyes side to side, looking for patrons for potential problems. The rest of the boys filed in about 5 minutes later. The patrons of the saloon seemed to be very interested in who was coming in. Jason noticed two men towards the far corner that seemed to be particularly interested in a group of boys. Ian moved towards the barkeep. Need 2 rooms for the night. Ian said as he put some coins on the bar. How much? He said. The bartender looked at Ian and said, $2 a night for each room. Ian put the coins away and pulled out a 5 greenback. Here you go. Keep it. Ian said. Top of the stairs, down the hall, last 2 doors on the right, the bartender said. Give us a bottle, too, Spider said. You all drinking, take the room to the far end, Henry noted. The boys went upstairs, shuffling their boots all the way up to the wooden flooring to the end of the hall. The 2 men that were sitting in the far corner of the saloon finished their drinks and went up the stairs. They had taken off their boots. They overheard Henry mention the drinkers were going to the far room, so they figured Ian was in the next to the last door on the right-hand side. The 2 bounty hunters got close to the door, drew their pistols, and broke in through the door, attempting to take all the boys by surprise. The room was empty. But the 2 men heard a loud bang and turned to look behind them as the boys filtered into the room and began beating them. Spider broke the bottle that he just got from the bartender over one of the men's heads. The other fell quickly with the 5 others beating on him, dropping his pistol onto the floor. Good eye, Jason, Rick said. Yeah, way to clock him, Johnny noted. A shame. That looked like good whiskey, Brad said. Ian began to smell the liquor spilled on the ground, and his mouth began to fill with water and saliva. He could feel it, started getting anxious. Leave them in here and we'll take turns watching through the night. Ian insisted. Good idea, I'll go first, Spider suggested. The others looked around. Henry said, I don't think so. I'll go first. The others nodded, and they all went to the other room and got some sleep. While Henry tied the 2 bounty hunters to chairs with some rope and gagged their mouths, they sat in a corner only on a chair to watch them. The boys took turns throughout the night without letting Spider near them. The sun rose, and with the sun shining, Ian was already getting up and ready for the day. The others were shortly behind. Ian went downstairs to talk to the bartender. Is everyone else in the room with the bounty hunters? Ian walked in. Okay, you all ready? Ian said. What about these two? Rick asked. I went down and paid for the room for 3 more days, Ian chided, looking at the bounty hunters. Did you all learn your lessons now? Don't go looking for us again, okay? Henry laughed. You think this taught them anything? Ian exclaimed, No. He looks at the bounty hunters. But you got your warning, boys. Now it's on you. The group of men went to the stables to get their horses. For the next week, the men moved through 2 more towns with not much trouble winning money from gambling and splitting up their fortunes. Spider still hasn't had much to say since Henry shook him. The next big town they came to was Concordia. That is the end of chapter 5. I don't see any questions. So, y'all have a nice night. Love you. Hope your days are bright and this year is much better for you than the last. Y'all have a good night. Bye.